The man who would become known simply as the Doc had seen a lot. As a Navy SEAL medic, his world was defined by controlled chaos, the sharp crack of gunfire, and the desperate rhythmic count of a chest compression. He'd pulled teammates back from the brink of death in dusty foreign towns, his hands working with a mechanical precision born of relentless training. He was 32, with a quiet intensity and eyes that had learned to scan for threats in the calmest of crowds. To him, the human body was a machine, a fascinating and fragile collection of systems that could be shocked, broken, or bled out. He understood its limits intimately, so, when he first saw her, he didn't think much of it. It was a Tuesday, a crisp fall morning at the small park near his apartment in Virginia Beach. And he was doing his own PT, a brutal mix of calisthenics and sprint work, when he noticed a woman on the path. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with a noticeable limp in her left leg. It wasn't a subtle favoritism. It was a full-on, foot-dragging, hip-dropping limp. She moved slowly, deliberately, her face a mask of concentration as she navigated the paved trail. Her name was Lena, and to the casual observer, she was just another person fighting through a tough physical therapy session. To the Doc, she was a textbook case of a significant lower body injury. He cataloged it, filed it away, and returned to his pull-ups. People got hurt. It was a fact of life. He saw her again 2 days later. Same limp, same determined expression. She was wearing worn-out running shoes and a gray sweatshirt. And she was walking with the aid of a single trekking pole. It wasn't a standard medical cane. It was the kind of thing a hiker would use, and she used it not as a crutch, but as an extension of her arm, planting it firmly with each step to take some of the weight off her left side. The Doc watched her for a moment. His professional curiosity piqued. She moved like someone who was used to covering distance, her pace slow but her rhythm unwavering. She made a full circuit of the 1-mile loop, her face pale with effort, then sat on a bench for a long time just breathing. He finished his workout and left, her image sticking with him longer than it should have. A week later, his view of her changed completely. It was a Saturday and the park was busier. He was doing a cool-down lap when he saw her again, this time off the main path. She was at a secluded pull-up bar, one of the few pieces of workout equipment in the park. What she was doing stopped him dead in his tracks. She had her back to him, but he could see her left leg, the injured one, was completely straight, resting on the seat of a nearby bench. Her right leg was bent, supporting her weight. In her hands, she held a 20-pound kettlebell, and she was performing a single-leg Romanian deadlift. The movement was slow, controlled, and looked agonizing. He could see the fine tremor in her supporting leg, the way her core muscles clenched to maintain balance. It was an advanced, high-risk exercise for someone with a healthy leg, let alone one that clearly had a severe issue. He was mesmerized. This wasn't just going for a walk. This was targeted, intelligent, and brutal rehabilitation. He should have kept walking. It was none of his business. But the clinician in him, the part of his brain that assessed and evaluated, wouldn't let it go. As he passed by, close enough to be heard, he muttered, without stopping, "If your glute med is weak, that exercise won't fix it if your mechanics are off." He didn't look back. He just kept running. He thought that would be the end of it. A cryptic comment from a stranger. But a few minutes later, as he was doing stretches on the grass, he saw her walking towards him. The limp was there, but her pace was determined. She stopped a few feet away, the trekking pole planted in front of her like a staff. She wasn't smiling. She was looking at him with an unnerving directness. "You're a trainer?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a wariness. "No," he said. "I'm not getting up. I'm a medic. I fix people. Or try to." Her eyes narrowed slightly, scanning him. He knew what she saw. A fit guy in his early 30s, standard athletic wear, a few old scars on his forearms. "You're military," she stated. It wasn't a question. Navy, he conceded. And you're rehabbing something serious. L3 or L4 disc? Or a femoral head fracture? For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed her face. She didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked her own. And you think my mechanics are off from one glance? He shrugged, getting to his feet. He was taller than her, but she didn't step back. I think you're strong. That deadlift requires serious core and posterior chain stability, but you're compensating with your QL and erector spinae on the left side. It's a subtle hitch right before you start the movement. You're trying to create stability where your hip isn't giving it to you. It's not a weakness issue in that moment. It's a motor control issue. The muscle is strong. The brain just can't find it in that position. He spoke with the detached confidence of a diagnostician. He expected her to get defensive, to tell him to mind his own business. Instead, she just stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then, she turned and walked back towards the pull-up bar. He watched her go, confused. But then she stopped, picked up the kettlebell, and turned her head just enough to look at him over her shoulder. Show me. It wasn't a request. It was a command. The doc found himself walking towards her, his professional pride officially on the line. He had her put the kettlebell down, and he asked her to stand facing him, feet hip-width apart. He gently placed his hands on her hips, his touch impersonal and professional, feeling the bony landmarks of her iliac crests. Close your eyes, he instructed. I want you to shift your weight onto your right leg. Now, without opening your eyes, tell me when you feel your left foot is completely unweighted. She did. She lifted her left foot slightly, hovering it above the ground. Now, he said, his voice low. Keep your eyes closed. Find your center. Don't just balance. Feel the architecture of your right hip, your ankle, your foot. Feel the ground. They stood like that for 30 seconds. He watched the micro-adjustments in her stance, the tiny sways as her proprioceptive system hunted for equilibrium. Then he asked her to open her eyes. Now try the deadlift. Same leg. But this time, before you even hinge, I want you to think about screwing your right foot into the ground like you're trying to twist the grass beneath it. Create tension from the ground up. That's your foundation. The lift is just a formality. She looked skeptical but positioned herself. She placed her right foot, the standing leg, and he saw her consciously grip the ground with her toes. She took a breath, her ribs expanding against the gray sweatshirt. Then, with agonizing slowness, she hinged forward, her left leg shooting out straight behind her. This time, the hitch was gone. The movement was smoother, the line from her head to her heel straighter. He saw the muscles in her right glute engage properly, stabilizing the hip joint. She only went down to a point of mild discomfort, not pain, and then slowly, deliberately, came back up. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. It felt different, she admitted. More solid. It's a start, the doc said. He gave her a slight nod, then turned and jogged away, leaving her alone with the kettlebell and the faint, unfamiliar sensation of a movement done right. He didn't expect to see her again. He'd given his free advice, satisfied his clinical curiosity, and that was that. But life in a city, even one as spread out as Virginia Beach, has a funny way of creating patterns. A week later, at a different coffee shop 3 miles from the park, he was waiting for his order when a voice behind him said, "The motor control guy." He turned. It was her, Lena. She was leaning on a simple black cane today, her limp still pronounced but somehow less labored. She was holding a cup of tea. "It's Doc." Actually," he said, "and it's not a diagnosis, just an observation." "It was a correct observation," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She gestured to a small table by the window. "Sit with me. I owe you an explanation." He hesitated for only a second. He was off duty, his mind was clear, and he was genuinely curious. He grabbed his coffee and joined her. Up close, he could see the fine lines of tension around her eyes, the kind etched by chronic pain. She wasn't beautiful in a conventional way, but her face was striking, defined by sharp cheekbones and a jaw that spoke of stubbornness. Lena, she introduced herself, extending a hand. Her grip was firm. And the diagnosis is a shattered acetabulum and a femoral head fracture that required 3 surgeries and 2 pieces of titanium hardware to put back together. A car accident, 18 months ago. A drunk driver ran a red light. T-boned me on the driver's side. The doc let out a low whistle. The acetabulum is the hip socket. Shattering it is a catastrophic injury, the kind that ends athletic careers and often leads to a lifetime of pain and a significant limp, if not a full hip replacement. For her to be walking at all, let alone attempting single-leg deadlifts, was remarkable. I've been through 4 physical therapists, she continued, her gaze steady on him. They all gave me the same exercises. Clamshells, bridges, leg raises, they all told me to listen to my body and that the limp was probably permanent. Soft tissue damage, they said. Learn to manage it. But you didn't buy it, the doc said. It wasn't a question. I'm a rock climber, or I was. For the first time, and a flicker of something raw and deep passed through her eyes. I guided in Yosemite. I lived in a van for 3 years climbing big walls. My body wasn't just a body. It was my livelihood, my home, my identity. The physical therapists were treating an injury. They weren't treating me. They didn't understand that I needed to not just walk, but to stand on a 2-inch ledge 3,000 feet in the air with all my weight on one leg, trusting that my hip would hold. The doc understood that kind of identity. The teams wasn't just a job. It was a brotherhood, a physical and mental state of being. To have it stripped away was unthinkable. So you started your own protocol, he said. I started reading biomechanics journals, strength and conditioning research. I learned about the central nervous system's role in movement, like about pain science. I figured if I couldn't fix the structure, I had to retrain the software running it. I've been at it for 6 months on my own. I've made progress, but I've hit a wall. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that was almost unnerving. You saw the wall in 10 seconds. You named it. You gave me a cue that changed my motor pattern instantly. That's not just being a medic. That's a different level of understanding. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. In the field, you don't have time for long-term PT. You have to get a guy functional now. You learn to find workarounds, to trick the body into doing what it needs to do. It's all just input and output. You give it the right input, you get the right output. My input has been all wrong, Lena said quietly. She looked down at her tea and then back at him. I have a proposal. It's unorthodox. And you can say no. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I need a second set of eyes, a brain that thinks about movement differently than a traditional PT. I don't need a trainer. I need someone who understands the functional, chaotic demands of a body in extreme circumstances. I can't pay you what a private coach would cost, but I can offer you a puzzle, a chance to apply your field medicine to a hard case. And I'm a damn good cook. The doc almost laughed. It was the most bizarre proposition he'd ever received. But as he looked at her, he saw past the cane and the limp. He saw the same unwavering focus he saw in the mirror every morning. He saw the grit of an operator. You'd be my project, he said slowly, and I'd be your, what? A biomechanics consultant? My guide, she corrected him, for the parts my brain can't find. He thought about his own life, the constant cycle of training, deployment, and the unsettling quiet of being home. The way his skills felt useless when he wasn't actively saving someone. This was different. This was a challenge that had nothing to do with bullets or blood, and everything to do with the quiet, stubborn resilience of the human spirit. Okay, he said, surprising himself. Let's see what we can do. But we do this my way. No drills for the sake of drills. Everything we do has a purpose, and that purpose is to get you back on a rock. Deal?" A slow, genuine smile spread across Lena's face, transforming it. It was the first time he'd seen her look anything other than fiercely guarded. "The deal." Their first official session wasn't in a gym. It was on the beach, at dawn. The doc believed that true function couldn't be tested in a sterile environment. The body had to adapt to the real world. He stood barefoot in the cold sand, watching Lena as she walked towards him from the boardwalk. Her limp was a constant, a signature of her trauma. "Today, we're not strengthening anything," he said as she reached him. "We're just gathering intel. I want you to walk, that's it, back and forth along the waterline. But I want you to do it with your eyes closed." She looked at him like he was insane. "You want the gimp to walk with her eyes closed on uneven, wet sand? I want your brain to stop relying on its primary input, your eyes, and start listening to the other 500,000 sensory receptors in your feet and joints. You're so focused on what you see as the problem, the limp, that you're not feeling the solutions your body is trying to offer. Close your eyes." She hesitated, then did as he said. He walked beside her, a steadying hand hovering just an inch from her elbow, not touching, but there. "Forget the limp," he murmured. "Just feel. Feel the give of the sand under your right heel. Feel how it's different under your left. Feel the subtle shift as the tide pushes and pulls at your ankles. Your body has to navigate this. Trust it." It was slow, almost comical at first. She wobbled, her steps becoming hesitant. But then something shifted. Her pace became more even, not in stride length, but in rhythm. Her arms relaxed at her sides. The intense focus on her face softened into a state of deep internal listening. They walked for 10 minutes like that, and a strange, silent parade on an empty beach. When she opened her eyes, she looked stunned. "It felt easier. For a few steps there, I almost forgot about it." "Your brain was too busy processing the chaos under your feet to send you a pain or 'I'm broken' signal," the doc explained. "It's a distraction technique, but it's also a reminder. Your body is more than that one injury. It's a whole system. We have to remind it of that." Over the following weeks, their sessions grew in complexity. They graduated from the beach to a grassy hill. He had her walk backwards, sideways, and in a crouch. He had her stand on one foot, her good one, while he lightly tossed a medicine ball at her from different angles, forcing her core and her injured leg, which was hovering for balance, to react and stabilize without conscious thought. One afternoon, in his apartment, he set up a simple obstacle course with cushions, a low coffee table, and a chair. "We're going to crawl," he announced. "Crawl?" she asked, incredulous. "Crawling is the first and most fundamental cross-body movement pattern we ever learn. It builds coordination between your left and right hemispheres, strengthens the deep stabilizers of your core and shoulders, and puts your hip through a massive range of motion in a non-weight-bearing, controlled environment. It's gold for your brain." He got down on his hands and knees and demonstrated a cross-crawl, right arm and left knee moving forward simultaneously, then left arm and right knee. He moved with an animal-like grace. Lena, after a moment of self-consciousness, joined him on the floor. For her, it was a revelation. The movement was awkward at first, her injured hip protesting the unfamiliar rotation. But as she repeated the pattern, the protest lessened. She felt muscles in her lower back and deep in her abdomen, engaging in a way they never had during a standard plank. She crawled under the coffee table, navigated around the chair, and felt a sense of childish glee mixed with profound physical relief. "This is insane," she panted, lying on her back on his rug after finishing the course. "I've paid thousands of dollars for therapy, and the most progress I've felt in months is from crawling on your floor like a baby." The doc handed her a water bottle. "It's not about complexity. It's about specificity. Most rehab teaches your muscles to fire in isolation. The world doesn't ask you to do clamshells. It asks you to step over a root while carrying a pack, or shift your weight to reach for a hold. Crawling, walking on sand, catching a ball. That's life. We're just rehearsing for it. The unorthodox training continued. He had her stand on one foot while brushing her teeth, forcing a minute or two of cumulative balance work into her daily routine. He had her practice sitting down and standing up from a low stool without using her hands, focusing on the eccentric control of her injured leg on the way down. He taught her about PRI, or Postural Restoration Institute, concepts, having her focus on her ribcage position and her breath to unlock a chronically tight left hip. Through it all, their relationship deepened. He learned about her life in Yosemite, the terrifying freedom of hanging thousands of feet in the air, the meditative quiet of a granite face. She learned about his world, and the brotherhood, the moral weight of his job, and the ghosts he carried. They were two people from completely different worlds, united by a shared language of physical extremity and a stubborn refusal to accept limits. He wasn't just her guide anymore. He was becoming her friend. And for Lena, for the first time since the accident, the summit of El Capitan, once an impossible dream, began to feel like a destination she might actually reach. 6 months after their first meeting on the beach, the doc told Lena to pack a bag. He wouldn't tell her where they were going, only that it was for a field exercise and to bring her climbing shoes. They drove for hours, heading west, the landscape changing from the coastal flatlands to rolling hills and finally to the sharp, jutting peaks of the Shenandoah National Park. They pulled up to the base of Old Rag Mountain, a notorious hike known for its strenuous rock scrambles. It wasn't Yosemite, but it was a formidable playground. Lena got out of the car and looked up at the granite slabs. A flicker of fear, raw and old, crossed her face. The doc saw it. "This isn't a test," he said quietly. "It's a date. We're just going to see the view. We hike up, we sit, we have a sandwich, we come down. That's it. No expectations." The hike began easily enough, a winding forest trail. Lena used her trekking pole, her gait steady. The doc walked behind her, watching. He wasn't looking for the limp anymore. He was looking for her stamina, her mental state, the way she navigated roots and rocks. As they climbed, the trail steepened, and soon they were at the first rock scramble, a series of large boulders that required using hands and feet to ascend. Lena stopped. She stared at the rock. The doc came to stand beside her. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she whispered. She took off her day pack and pulled out her climbing shoes. She sat on a rock and changed into them, the motion slow and deliberate. Then she approached the boulder. She placed her right hand on a hold, then her left. She lifted her right foot, finding a small ledge. Then came the moment of truth. She had to shift her weight and lift her left leg, the injured one, to place it on a hold above her. It required hip flexion and stability. It required trust. The doc held his breath. He saw the micro-hesitation, the flicker of doubt. But then she did it. She placed her left foot, pressed down, and pushed herself up. The movement was clean. There was no hitch, no grimace of pain. She moved methodically, her body remembering a language it had forgotten. He followed close behind, not as a spotter but as a witness. They scrambled for an hour, the difficulty increasing. At one point, they came to a narrow chimney, a crack between two rock faces that required stemming, pushing against both walls with your feet and back to shimmy up. It required immense core strength and precise control of her hips to maintain pressure. It was the kind of move that would have been impossible for her 6 months ago. Lena entered the chimney. The doc watched from below as she found her rhythm. He saw her injured leg press firmly against the rock, holding her weight. He saw her face, a mask of concentration but not of fear. She moved up, inch by inch, until she emerged at the top. A few moments later, He joined her on a broad, flat shoulder of rock, with a panoramic view of the Shenandoah Valley stretching out before them, painted in shades of autumn gold and crimson. They sat in silence for a long time, eating their sandwiches, the wind tugging at their clothes. Lena's eyes were fixed on the horizon, but the doc could see they were wet. "I didn't think I'd ever feel that again," she said, her voice thick. "The pressure of the rock against my foot, the problem-solving, the quiet up here. It's a different kind of quiet than anywhere else." "It's a good quiet," the doc agreed. She turned to him. "Why did you do this?" "I was a stranger in a park, a puzzle. There had to be 100 easier ways to spend your free time." The doc looked out at the valley. He thought about the faces of men he'd lost, the ones he'd saved, the ones he couldn't. He thought about the feeling of his own skills being useless in peacetime. He thought about the look in Lena's eyes the first time she'd done that deadlift correctly. "Because you refused to be broken," he said simply. "I see a lot of people who get hurt and they just stop. The injury becomes their identity. They become the guy with the bad knee, the girl with the bad back. But you didn't. You took the most catastrophic injury I've ever seen outside of a combat zone, and you treated it like an engineering problem. You decided to rebuild yourself from the ground up with no blueprint. That's not a puzzle. That's a goddamn miracle. I just helped you turn some of the right screws." They sat for another hour, not talking much. Just being present in the moment. The descent was harder on her hip than the ascent, the constant jarring impact a new challenge. But she managed it, her focus never wavering. They reached the car as the sun was setting, tired, sore, but with a profound sense of accomplishment. A few weeks later, the doc got his orders. A deployment. He didn't know for how long or exactly where. The night before he left, Lena came to his apartment. She didn't say much. She just handed him a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a photo she'd taken from the top of Old Rag. It was of him, looking out at the valley, the wind in his hair, a rare, unguarded smile on his face. Taped to the back of the photo was a small, smooth piece of granite from the summit. "For when you need to find the quiet," she said. He looked at the small stone in his palm. It was a piece of her world, a piece of the battle she'd won. He tucked it carefully into the pocket of his uniform, over his heart. It was a reminder that strength came in many forms. It came in the roar of a helicopter and the crack of a rifle, and it came in the silent, stubborn will of a woman who, against all odds, had taught her broken body to fly again. 6 months later, on a sweltering afternoon, Lena was at a small climbing gym in Virginia Beach. She was on an overhang, working on a route that required powerful, dynamic moves. Her hip was a dull ache, a permanent companion, but it was no longer a limiter. It was just another part of her. She moved up the wall with a fluid grace, her body a testament to months of hidden, unconventional work. A shadow fell over the mat below her. Meant she glanced down. It was the doc. He was back. He was in civilian clothes, looking tired but whole. He gave her a small nod and pointed up at the next hold. She grinned, reached for it, and pulled herself up. After she finished the route and lowered down, she walked over to him. Her gait was almost normal now, a slight, almost imperceptible stiffness the only remaining clue to her past. "The view's better from up there," she said, her eyes bright. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small piece of granite, worn smooth from being carried. "I kept it with me. It worked." She smiled. "So, what now? Back to the beach for some eyes-closed walking?" He shook his head, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "No, I think we're done with training. How about you just teach me to climb?" And the SEAL medic and the rock climber walked out of the gym together into the fading Virginia sun. The teacher had become the student, and the injured woman, once bowed but never broken, had found her greatest strength wasn't in the summit she'd reached, but in the quiet, powerful act of simply refusing to fall. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter, written not in the language of injury and rehab, but in the shared, silent understanding of two people who had looked into the abyss and chosen to climb.